of 1991 saw WWE try plenty of new things, only for most of them to fall flat on their faces. They tried to push Sergeant Slaughter as an anti-American turncoat, which led to apathy from their audience. They tried to introduce a new type of pay-per-view with This Tuesday in Texas, only for about 6 people to actually watch the thing. And they tried to introduce Ric Flair as the real world's champion, only for WCW to slap them with a lawsuit faster than they could say big gold belt. Ah well, at least they could always rely on the wrestling itself, which had a bumper year in '91. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best WWE matches of 1991. Join us! Number 10, The Rockers vs. the Barbarian and Haku at WrestleMania 7. WrestleMania 7 is not known for being a great show, in fact it's known for being quite the opposite, but that's not to say there weren't some bangers in amongst the trash. Take the main card's opening match, a tag bout pitting Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty of the Rockers against the Tongan powerhouse duo of Haku and the Barbarian. Not two guys you want to run into in a dark alley. Well, or anywhere really. The Rockers' smaller stature and high-flying offense made them the perfect foes for these Goliaths, who looked brutal when smacking poor Shawn and Marty around. The two pipsqueaks weren't going to take this lying down, however, as they fought back with a volley of tandem offense that had manager Bobby Heenan squealing on the outside. Eventually, Michaels landed a big crossbody on Haku to score the upset victory to a huge pop. It may have only gone 10 minutes or so, but this is exactly what wrestling shows at the time needed as their openers, fast-paced with a feel-good ending. As for the Rockers, they would go on to have a very prosperous year that definitely didn't end with somebody getting chucked through a barbershop window. I mean, he jumped, didn't he, Brain? Number 9, Team Flair vs. Team Piper at Survivor Series. 1991 saw one of the biggest acquisitions in WWE history when they brought in Ric Flair whilst he was still in possession of the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. It's a long story, alright? The so-called real world's champion immediately got into a feud with rowdy Roddy Piper, presumably over who was the most mental, which led to them finding 3 partners each for a good old-fashioned Survivor Series tag match. Flair had the Mountie, the Warlord, and Ted DiBiase on his side, whilst Piper was joined by Virgil, the British Bulldog, and Bret Hart. Bulldog was first to go when Flair pinned him, followed by Piper taking down Warlord to even the score, and then all hell broke loose. A mass brawl ensued in the ring, leading the referee to disqualify everybody involved. So the match ended in a draw, right? Nope, not quite. Flair had been on the outside whilst all of this was happening, leaving him as the sole survivor. This was a genius finish, one that proved that Flair truly was the dirtiest player in the game, and the work up to this point had been pretty good between a bunch of good to great wrestlers. And Virgil. Sorry, couldn't resist. Number 8, Ric Flair vs. Tito Santana at Battle Royal at the Albert Hall. As any British wrestling fan of a certain age will know, WWE hosted an event in London in 1991 called Battle Royal at the Albert Hall. You'll never guess what the venue and the main event were. Apart from the titular match, which was won by the British Bulldog, of course, 7 other clashes took place, including one featuring our old pal Ric Flair. The Nature Boy took on Tito Santana earlier in the night in one of his first big matches as a Federation man. El Matador was the steadiest of steady hands in WWE at the time, making him the perfect opponent to introduce Flair to a new audience. In the longest singles match on the show, Flair and Santana worked a slow, methodical pace to start before ramping up the energy as they approached the final stretch. Nate was able to apply the dreaded figure 4 leg lock with extra rope assistance, naturally, and Tito Santana scored a brilliant near fall off a flying forearm, or as Jesse Ventura used to call it, the flying burrito. Different times, you know? Flair eventually got a roll-up win with a handful of tights, giving him the big victory on British soil. Number 7, Ted DiBiase vs. Virgil at SummerSlam. I know I made fun of him earlier, but 1991 was kind of the year of Virgil. He turned on the $1 Million Man at the Royal Rumble, beat him via countout at WrestleMania, and then took him on again at SummerSlam with the coveted $1 Million Championship on the line. The future living meme wasted no time going right after his tormentor as Ted bumped his gold-plated buttocks off to make his opponent look good. I mean, he took an atomic drop so hard that he bounced over the top rope into the floor. That can't have been good for the family jewels. DiBiase thought he'd escaped with the belt again after Sensational Sherry caused a DQ, but the match was allowed to continue to rapturous applause from the audience. Virgil then took advantage of a turnbuckle pad that the heels had exposed, bashing Ted's head in before scoring the win and the gold. The actual in-ring wrestling might not have been amazing or anything, but this was all about the story. The downtrodden manservant defeating his abusive boss for his own custom championship. Tell me something more perfectly wrestling than that. Go on, just try. Number 6, Kato versus Shawn Michaels on an MSG show. Before their rivalry with the Angry Tongans, the Rockers had been dealing with a team called the Orient Express. We'll get to their most famous match later, but for now, let's talk about a tussle from the world's most famous arena. At one of WWE's shows for the Madison Square Garden network, Shawn Michaels took on the masked Kato, one half of the Express. The reason why he was wearing a mask is because this supposedly Japanese character was actually played by Canadian wrestler Paul Diamond. Again, different times. The match was electric from start to finish, with both men traveling so fast they rivaled the actual Orient Express. Michaels sold like a trooper for Kato, who was never dynamite in the ring or anything, playing up to his underdog heel persona, whilst the Japanese man reveled in being hated. Kato got the win after his partner interfered, but there can be no doubt over who benefited most from this one. This was the first time Michaels had proven that he could hold his own as a singles guy and get a great match out of a lesser opponent too. You know what, I see big things in this kid's future. Number 5, Bret Hart versus Ted DiBiase at an MSG show. The final piece of WWE programming from 1991 was another MSG network show on the 29th of December, because who needs to see their families over the holiday period? Though the night's main event slot went to Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair, the best match went to the Intercontinental Championship tussle, which saw defending champion Bret Hart taking on the $1 Million Man. The Hitman had really come into his own in 1991, but still needed some more credible opponents if fans were going to buy him as a single star. Ted certainly carried that name value and had the tools to help elevate the rapidly rising Canadian hero. The $1 Million Man actually thought he had won the match, but this was just sensational Sherry ringing the bell to try and distract the referee. The fighting continued, with Hart getting back on top via a daring dive to the outside before learning that the match's time limit had expired just as he was about to win. A proper finish would have been nice, yeah, but this was still a brilliantly close battle between two of the most competent workers of the age. Number 4, Mr. Perfect versus Shawn Michaels on Primetime Wrestling. For the first half of 1991, the Intercontinental Championship scene was dominated by Mr. Perfect, who was in the middle of a run that would last for 279 days when all was said and done. This reign ran through a special edition of Primetime Wrestling called Superstars and Stripes Forever, where he would put the belt on the line against a man who would also establish a legacy through the workhorse belt. Shawn Michaels took on Perfect for the first time ever in this IC title match, beginning at a furious pace when the Rocker launched himself over the top rope, only to land on some poor extra at ringside. Well, at least I hope they were an extra. Perfect proceeded to beat the living hairspray out of his challenger, prompting Marty Jannetty and Bobby Heenan to get involved for their respective associates. Michaels nearly won it with a super kick, only for Hennig to nail a perfect plex that was broken up by the Big Boss Man to end things in a DQ. A wild and crazy encounter between two all-time great technicians. This isn't the best match these two could have had together, but it was still a thrill. Number 3, the Rockers versus the Orient Express at Royal Rumble. 2 months before failing to beat Perfect, Michaels would have better luck at the Royal Rumble, where he and Party Marty teamed up to take on their fierce rivals at the time, the Orient Express. Kato was joined by his partner Tanaka, who also wasn't Japanese, but had at least been trained in Japan, which I guess is something. Watching this match back over 30 years later, it's amazing how much of it holds up through a modern lens. Both teams are just lightning fast, flinging their bodies around with reckless abandon to create some scintillating tag team offense. Michaels did a tremendous job in selling the heels' attacks, which built to a nuclear hot tag when Jannetty was able to get in and run wild. Hey, maybe he'll be the breakout star when these two part ways. Then again, maybe not. The finish came when Kato had Marty in a slingshot position, only for Shawn to knock him down and send his partner flying through the air. Jannetty then flipped over Tanaka, rolled him up, and got the win, an extraordinary finish to one of the best matches during the dying days of WWE's Tag Team Golden Age. Number 2, The Ultimate Warrior versus Randy Savage at WrestleMania 7. Hey, what's better than a retirement match with one of the biggest stars of the era? I'll tell you, a retirement match with two of the biggest stars of the era. This was the backdrop to the Ultimate Warrior and Macho King Randy Savage's epic war at WrestleMania 7. Whoever lost would be forced to step away from the ring for good, so naturally, people were pretty interested in how this would go down. This match had nothing to do with technical ability and everything to do with star power. Everything these two titans did was met with thunderous applause, as the fans simply couldn't imagine a world without either one of them in it. There were some killer spots too though, like Savage hitting a whopping 5 elbow drops in a row, only for Warrior to power up and fire back, which would eventually result in the Macho King's defeat. However, the drama wasn't over when the bell rang, as Sensational Sherry started kicking her former charge when he was down. But wait, what's this? It's Miss Elizabeth running through the crowd, and she's beating up Sherry and embracing the Macho Man for the first time in 2 years. I'm not crying, you are. Number 1, Mr. Perfect versus Bret Hart at SummerSlam. Soap opera drama between two jacked-up cartoon characters is great and all, but sometimes the best wrestling matches are the ones with the best wrestling. SummerSlam 1991 saw Mr. Perfect put that lengthy IC title run on the line against Bret Hart, who had been quickly climbing the ranks as a solo act. The two grapplers followed that tried-and-tested wrestling formula of starting slow and methodical and building to a dramatic climax, and they did this just as well as anyone else before or since. Picture-perfect mat wrestling seamlessly segued into power moves and counters, which flowed into the champ using dirty tactics like sending Hart into the turnbuckle, only for the Hitman to find his resolve and fight back. Perfect was wrestling this classic with a completely shot back, by the way, which is insane and shows the lengths he was willing to go to get the excellence of execution to the next level. After Bret kicked out of the heavily protected Perfect Plex, he was then able to counter a leg drop into a sharpshooter for the best closing stretch of the entire year. Hennig had lost, Hart was the new champion, and a legend had been made.